Class, I apologize for posting this tutorial rather late, but I wanted to make sure everyone had completed their supply-demand assignment relating to corn before I posted a further explanation, only because I am going to go over this assignment and I didn't want to give the answers away to anyone. So first let's start by constructing a supply and demand graph where the vertical axis is equal to price and the horizontal axis is equal to Q. You may know these also from algebra as Y and your x-axis. Now, as we've learned in Chapter 3, the law of demand states that as the price of a product decreases, the quantity demanded increases. We would graph this by starting out in the upper left-hand corner and moving downward to the right. This means that price and quantity are inversely related in the law of demand, which means as one goes up, the other goes down, and vice versa. In math, we call this a negative slope, where slope is identified by the variable m. It's negative, meaning it moves downward from left to right. We also learned that the law of supply states as the price increases, quantity supplied increases, which means that we would start at the bottom left and move upwards to the right. In math terms, the slope of the supply curve would be positive. Now, to further clarify what may be a confusing topic, when we move from one point on either the supply curve or the demand curve, say from point A to point B, movements along the same curve are referred to as an increase in quantity supplied. Not an increase in supply. An increase in supply or demand is signified by a rightward shift in the curve. And in Chapter 4, or the end of Chapter 3 and the beginning of Chapter 4, goes over some of the drivers for an increase in demand. Now, keep this in mind that if we go from any point on an existing curve, again on the demand curve, as we did with the supply curve, this is referred to as an increase in quantity demanded, and vice versa. If we go from B to A on any of these curves, it's a decrease in quantity either demanded or supplied. A decrease in supply or demand is indicated by a leftward shift in one of the curves. Now, let's take a look at your homework question relating to the supply and demand for corn. We can see the two axes that are graphed, the supply of corn, identified as S sub C, and the demand of corn, identified as D sub C. As we learned from the chapter, where the supply and demand curves intersect is what's known as the market, or is known as market equilibrium, and market equilibrium price, and market equilibrium quantity. Let's say, for this example, that this is 1,000 bushels of corn at a price of $3 per bushel. Now, we said that corn has many uses, and the use of corn, or the use of any product, is going to drive its demand. The demand for the product is going to be how many people are available to buy it, and the more use a product has, the more demand will increase. So before we move forward on the graphs, what I want to do is take a step back and now create a demand table, or a demand schedule, as it is referred to in Chapter 3 of your text. Now, as we take a look at the demand schedule for corn, we laid out a couple of variables. Price, which is price per barrel in this example. quantity before an increase in the demand for ethanol fuels or biofuels, and the quantity afterwards. Much like in the text, what I did was lay out the quantity demanded for both before and after at each price point in a tabular format to develop my demand schedule. So you can see at a price of 50 cents, quantity demanded before was 3,000, quantity demanded afterwards was 3,500, and basically for every 50-cent drop in price, there was a decrease of 500 barrels demanded until we get to $2.50, where that decrease slowed to 250 barrels. As you could see, this is working in reverse ascending order, which if you take the law of demand, if you take the law of demand and flip it around, as price increases, as you see price going up, quantity demanded is going to decrease. And that theory follows through for both before and after the demand for biofuels increases. And what I did in the second column here for quantity demanded after is increase the demand 500 barrels for each price point until I got to $2.50, where I increased it $250. Now, if we take this schedule and now overlay it with our previous supply and demand graph, is the combination or the graphical representation of our quantity before table, where this being $3, this being 50 cents. Now, if we were to regraph the Q sub A, which is going to be the quantity demanded after an increase in biofuels, we saw that at $3, our market equilibrium, we go from 1,000 to 1,250 barrels, which we could say is this point here. At a price of 50 cents, we're at 3,500 barrels, which is right here at this point. If we were to now regraph everything, we would create a new demand curve at each additional price point. And we see that we have now a new market equilibrium price. Now, when we shift the supply curve, or we increase supply to account for this increase in demand, we are not increasing supply. Remember, we are increasing the quantity supplied, which has repercussions for every other crop that is going to be grown, which we will now go over and show the true impact of an increase, not only for the price of corn per bushel for every additional use, but the price impact on every additional crop that could be grown on the farm that is growing corn. Now, as the question stated, corn has many uses. Corn, in that instance, is an input. It can be used to create other food products such as tortillas. It can be eaten as a food itself. It can be a base for biofuel, but it's also used as feed for poultry. Now, since corn is an input, and all of these products utilize corn in one way or the other, what most students forgot in their assignment is the price increase in corn per bushel for an increase in demand, the effect that price increase had on the input cost and the output price of the products that use corn. For the most part, everyone realized that the price of corn would increase to those of us that are going to go to the market and buy an ear of corn so we could have corn on the cob. We all know that. But what we don't look at, and what we might forget, is now that the price of tortillas and other products that utilize corn as an input for food will increase. The cost of biofuels at the pump will increase, and the cost of our chicken and our turkey is going to increase. Why? Because the basic way to create a price of any product is by taking its cost and then adding some profit margin to it. If the cost goes up and we want to keep our profit the same, by taking this calculation and working it through, we will see that our price is going to go up. Not only the price for the products that rely on corn or the complementary products that rely on corn is going to go up, but other products are going to go up in price as well. Corn is grown on farms. So let's just say that a farmer has 10 acres of land. Land is a resource or an input or a factor of production. We know that resources have a finite quantity, meaning that there is a limited supply. It's not an unlimited supply, and land is a perfect example. When a farmer has this land, he may decide to break up his land amongst 4 crops. Let's just say those crops are corn, soy, potatoes, and let's just say beans. And if he divides it evenly, that means there's 2.5 acres of land allocated to each of these 4 crops. But as the price for corn increases to match the increase in demand, what a farmer would do is just allocate more of his land to corn and less to the other 3 products that he grows. So after the price increases, a farmer may plant his lot similar to something like this, where 4 acres of land is now dedicated to corn instead of 2.5, and now all additional crops have their land limited to 2 acres, a drop of 1/2 of an acre each. Now, because no additional land was added, meaning there was no new land masses created in which to plant crops or plant corn, the existing resources were just reallocated. We have an increase in quantity supplied and not an increase in supply. The only way we can increase the supply of corn is to have more land to grow it on. And I don't mean the allocation of more land, because what a farmer could have done is he could have grown, or he could have used his entire 10 acres to grow corn. He could use his existing factors of production to either increase or decrease the quantity that he supplies. Since that farmer only has 10 acres, and all other farmers, may assume, has the same amount of land, they will only grow the amount of corn that that total amount of available land can grow. In that instance, if corn increases in price to, say, $6 a barrel, then everyone would allocate their 10 acres to growing corn, and supply of corn would be at this level. Let's just say that that's at 10,000 bushels of corn. But that's the maximum amount of supply available given the current factors of production, which will not change Only the farmer's willingness to supply more or less will change given available market price points. The only way to increase supply and to create more bushels at each price point, which is how you should distinguish between an increase in quantity and an increase in either supply and demand, is that each price point now has additional quantity. And the only way to do that for supply is to invent more land. Or, as they do in New York City, where land is scarce, build your farms upwards. But since building upwards on farmland is not a very popular technique, let's just leave it at that and move on to demand. We already saw why the demand increases and creates a new equilibrium point. What we only saw, or what we're describing now, is showing now that farmers are allocating more land to increase quantity supplied. If new land was invented and supply was increased, we would have a different equilibrium point, and we could see that the price impact is much less severe than with just an increase in quantity supplied. Now, to take this one step further, we all saw that the increase in quantity supplied for corn is going to increase, while demand increases. What's going to happen, though, is that quantity supplied of soy is going to decrease because land is being taken away from soy and they're producing less of it. In that case, we will have at a different price point, or at a lower price point, what's known as a shortage of soy. When there's a shortage of soy or a shortage of any product, buyers will pay more. So price will go up because they want to be the ones that have that limited or acquire that limited supply. So what happens is that price of soy starts to go up. Eventually it'll go up where farmers reallocate land to growing soy and brings it back to market equilibrium. But we could take this example and show the price increase for both beans and potatoes. The same thing is going to happen. So as the price increases for corn, the price of its complementary products, but also the price for other products is going to increase as well, especially those products that require the same factors of production in order to produce. Now, I hope this clarifies some of the questions you may have related to supply and demand, and what this hopefully will do was help to explain some of the increases and decreases that we may see at the supermarket and at the markets when we go to buy crops and foods.